Bryce Daley was just 19, a college freshman living in a modest townhouse on the outskirts of Dallas. A natural in front of the camera, he'd built a small but dedicated following on TikTok. His followers adored him for his goofy personality, his wild pranks, and his love for gaming. He'd always been that kid, charming, funny, and full of life. But none of them could have known that the screen they were watching would be the last place they'd see him alive. It was a late Friday night in early October when Bryce decided to go live. He was alone in his apartment, his brother Cody nowhere to be found. Bryce had messaged him a few hours earlier, but the response had been typical, short, and a little off. "I'm out, don't wait up," Cody had texted. It wasn't unusual for Cody to vanish for days at a time, only to reappear with a half-hearted excuse and a gruff attitude. Bryce didn't think much of it. The camera flicked on, and his followers flooded the chat with messages of excitement. Bryce grinned, settling into his chair with his phone in hand. "What's up, guys?" he said, his voice loud and energetic. "Tonight's gonna be crazy, I promise you that." He'd been talking about plans for the weekend, some party at a friend's place, and the usual banter flowed. But Bryce's mind was distracted. He had been feeling uneasy all day, like something was off. It was subtle at first, a strange message from a fan earlier, some weird comments under his posts, but he brushed it aside. Maybe it was just the pressure of keeping up with his social media image. He hadn't even noticed when the smoke started to curl from the corner of his kitchen. He was mid-laugh when he saw it, a small flicker in the background. At first, he thought it was a shadow or something with his lighting setup, but when it spread, his heart dropped into his stomach. A spark of flame leapt from the stovetop, catching onto the dish rag he had left out earlier. Bryce froze. "What the hell?" he muttered, the tone of his voice changing from playful to nervous. The fire spread quickly, licking at the walls with an unnerving speed. He stood up, trying to assess the situation, but panic clouded his mind. His fans' messages started flooding in. "Bryce, your place is on fire. Get out of there." He stumbled toward the door, but by now, the flames had spread across the kitchen and into the living room. The thick smoke hit him like a punch to the chest, the acrid stench of burning fabric and plastic making it hard to breathe. His mind raced. "I need to get out," he thought, but his legs refused to move. His followers could see it all. They watched as Bryce staggered, coughing and choking on the smoke. "Help me," he yelled, the panic in his voice rising. "Someone, please." The camera kept rolling. His followers screamed at him to get out, but the fire was moving too quickly. His phone, still clutched in his shaking hand, filmed the destruction as it consumed his life. A knock on the door. Or was it a bang? His phone shook, dropping slightly as the fire reached the walls behind him. In the brief moments of clarity between the smoke, Bryce could have sworn he heard his brother's voice, louder than before. "Bryce." It was hoarse, almost frantic, but Bryce wasn't sure. He barely registered anything at that point, the air thick and hot as the flames crawled higher, closer. And then, it was over. The fire department arrived too late. By the time they breached the door, there was no sign of life in the townhouse. The flames had devoured everything in its path. The only evidence left was Bryce's phone, still recording, its screen cracked and darkened by smoke. His last moments, immortalized for the world to see. The authorities quickly labeled it as a case of arson. Bryce's fans were heartbroken, the world shocked at how it had all gone so wrong. But as investigators dug deeper, they uncovered something disturbing. Bryce had been receiving increasingly unsettling direct messages from one particular fan. The messages started innocently enough, compliments on his content, messages of support, but they soon grew obsessive. The fan seemed to know personal details about Bryce's life, things only someone close would know. The messages became threatening, laced with hints about his family, his whereabouts, and even his brother. One message in particular stood out: "I know what your brother did." The authorities speculated that the fan had somehow found out about Bryce's brother Cody's financial troubles, his secret dealings with unsavory people, and possibly his dark obsession with Bryce's online fame. There were signs that the fan had been stalking Bryce for weeks, perhaps even getting close enough to sabotage his life in a twisted attempt to get closer to him. It was clear, the fire had been deliberately set. But the real question remained: who was behind it? Most of the evidence pointed to someone Bryce trusted. Someone who had access to his home. As detectives delved into Cody's background, they uncovered a web of resentment and jealousy. Cody had never liked living in his brother's shadow. Bryce's success, his popularity, Cody had always felt left behind. The direct messages had been the final straw. The authorities believed that Cody had orchestrated the fire, using an obsessed fan to cover his tracks. It was too clean, too deliberate. But Cody denied everything. He wasn't home that night, he said. He had an alibi. But something about his cold demeanor, the way he avoided looking anyone in the eye, made the detectives uneasy. And when they found the gas canister hidden in the back of his car, it was clear that there was more to the story than anyone realized. The official cause of the fire was never fully determined, but the truth was too hard to ignore. Bryce had been taken by someone who should have been protecting him. His brother, a man who had spent years seething in the shadows, had finally taken everything. The last video, the final scream, haunted the people who watched that night. And as Bryce's name trended on social media in the days after, his fans began to wonder, how far would someone go for fame? In Dallas, they still whispered about Bryce Daley, about the fire, the family secrets, and the final stream that never should have been.